This is The Neutral Position, hosted by Nick Palmisciano, bringing honesty and reason back into conversation. Here's your host, Nick Palmisciano.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of The Neutral Position with Nick Palmisciano. This show was started because, frankly, I feel like great conversations have ceased happening in America. We're given a couple of positions that we're supposed to argue with each other over, but we never actually sit down and have nuanced conversation the way we did when I was growing up. So the whole idea here is that we sit down, we talk, and we try to see a little bit of each other's perspective. Today, my guest is Chris Cathers. He was a former operator, Green Beret, and then CIA, GRS, went on to become a badass businessman as a turnaround specialist. And then life kind of took a turn. We're here to talk about that and a whole bunch of other stuff. So Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show. And if you could introduce yourself a little bit, because I probably screwed up at least 70% of it.
Well, thanks for having me. And I definitely appreciate you having me on the podcast. I think you pretty much summed it up well. I mean, to be honest with you, do you want me to talk a little bit about like where I grew up or that kind of thing?
What do you want to tell me? Tell me everything.
Wow. Where to start? That's a great question. Well, I grew up in the Northeast. I'm a reformed Yankee. And
when you say Yankee, I need to be more specific. Are we talking like a real American New Englander? Or are we talking New York?
Philadelphia.
All right. Okay.
So,
all right. Okay.
Rocky.
So you like liberty.
100%.
You're not like
100%.
You're not like those New Yorkers that were really more like, on the side of the Brits during the Revolutionary War. Okay. We're aligned.
But I've been in the South most of my adult life.
Okay.
So when I joined the military, I moved down south. But that was my formative years when I was in high school. I spent it all up in Philadelphia in the Northeast, and then afterwards, I just traveled the world. Especially within the military. Spent many years overseas, which kind of broadened my perspective and my appreciation for the country, and just how good we have it, overall.
Yeah. Why Green Beret?
Well, I was a little bit of a troublemaker growing up, and my father was in law enforcement. He was in the military back in '60 to '64, so. Early days, he volunteered right when Vietnam era was kicking off, and luckily he didn't have to go overseas. And he raised me predominantly by myself, but I have two brothers and a sister, and we all kind of got split up at the time, growing up from divorce when I was 6. But my dad raised me, and he kind of put up with me for a long time, and had a lot of impact. His military service kind of was one thing, but I just wanted to get a challenge. I was a good athlete growing up. I wasn't academically inclined. I just didn't stick. And ultimately, I was like, well, my dad gave me 3 options. He's like, join the military, go get a job, or go to college and pay for it yourself because your academics aren't where they need to be.
To be honest, I was hoping the third option was going to be something weird like, or follow your passion for dance,
Yep, nope.
But no dance.
No dance there's no dance in my future.
So you said military. Now, were you an X-ray or did you do it the old-fashioned way?
No, this is pre. So I joined the military in '92 right after high school.
So you're old like me.
100%. So I went through the last hard class, of everything. Back to the dinosaurs.
Yeah, 100%. See, we're aligned. So what did you do before you were a Green Beret?
So ironically, I was I like to tell that was my I got screwed by a recruiter story. They saw me coming a million miles away. So when my dad gave me the ultimatum, I went down the MEPS like literally that week, and I joined for 6 years. I said, I want to be an airborne ranger. And this is pre-internet, right? Yeah. So I didn't have the resource that all the people have now, Google search, watching documentaries, all that kind of stuff. So I told them I want to be an airborne ranger.
And what did they really make you?
I became a 68 X-ray. So I went into aviation, the furthest thing away.
That could be worse, though. You weren't.
I don't know.
You weren't fueling anything.
No, I was working on. I was a 68 X-ray, which is it's armament system repair. So we worked on electrical systems, and we actually loaded Apache helicopters. So didn't really set me up for success when I went to selection. Because quickly I was like, I want to go to Ranger School. They're like, you can't. You're not non-combat MOS. So I was like, but the recruiters told me, they said I was good. And they were like, no, you're not good. And you can go the SF route. So I did. And I flew from Germany. I was stationed in Germany at the time. And all they told me at the time was like, hey, man, all you got to do is not quit. I'm like, all right, I'm good at that. And I went through selection 95, made it my first pass. Went to airborne school and got assigned to my unit. And
so that was fast.
Yeah, I was young. I mean,
you were
young.
I'm surprised.
I was an E4.
Yeah, because usually it's back in those days, it was E6.
So I had the odds stacked against me, to be honest with you. I came from a soft skill MOS coupled with the fact that, well, shoot, I don't even lost my train of thought on that. I just didn't have a lot going for me at that time. All the other guys had a lot of experience. They came from Ranger Battalion and all the, I'm looking around and I see like all these dudes that have been through a lot of schooling and they're 11 Bravos, and they hand me a Ranger handbook the first time and I'm like, what's this? So I had a lot of catching up to do, but luckily physically I had a lot of things going for me. My mindset was a big attribute. So that got me through a lot of it.
So you go straight through?
Yeah.
Went straight through. And what was your specialty on the team?
I was an 18 Bravo, so I was a weapon,
so you were a
weapon
Bravo.
sergeant. Yeah,
so
I was a nug.
You were the meathead. You were the meathead of the team. That's awesome, man. That's great.
Well, I think it goes back to when I went through the whole process. I didn't have a lot of options. I was like, I want to be a medic. Yeah, of course, that sounds cool. Thank God I wasn't a medic. I was too, at the time I just wasn't, I would have had problems, but I did have problems in the Q course. I did fail several times in the sense of like, I got recycled for land navigation because I didn't have any background. So what I ended up doing is just running point to point in the STAR course. So I probably covered like, where normal people cover maybe 20 miles, I probably covered like triple the distance because I just ran. Yeah. So I just tried to make it up with like, with whatever I had.
Yeah.
Meatheadedness.
Yeah. When in doubt, just like push it harder.
Exactly.
The door won't open. Have you tried smashing your body into it until you're unconscious? I got it. So that life, you're successful in the military. You end up working for the agency in GRS. What made you decide to get out? To like walk away from the government entirely?
No, it's a good question. The main reason was when I went into SF, it was the op tempo at the time. Mm-hmm. So I did 2 deployments with SF. That was it. And, I did have an encounter on I think it was my second one in 99. We ended up getting an ambush, which was pretty rare at the time.
Yep.
But, we were doing a lot of foreign internal defense, FID missions. I was doing counter poaching, demining. And I was like, look, man, I want to do the next level. So I had 2 options. It was either going to the unit and try out there and see if I could make the selection process, and I was already at my second re-enlistment. It was like, or get out and pursue something different.
For those of you that don't know, the unit is what is typically referred to as Delta Force or CAG, Combat Applications Group. But, for you non-military folks listening or watching, he's talking about the highest echelon of special operations.
But that ultimately pushed me. I was like, look, I had a couple conversations, especially with my team sergeant. He was a really good dude. And we had a candid conversation. I said, look, man, like I can either go that route, I can go try out for the unit because the op tempo is not what, this is why I came in. I didn't want to just be, training is one of the first things that you do as a force multiplier. But, I was on my second re-enlistment, put me over 10 years. So I was like, look, I'm considering getting out. And he's like, yeah, I understand. So he supported it. Then I went to PA school because they told me I couldn't be a medic. Primarily, I was like, let me try this.
So basically people telling you can't do something is one of your primary motivators. Mm. Okay.
It's a little incentive,
Got it. Okay. So you go to PA school.
Yeah. And while I was in PA school, that's when 9/11 occurred. So I got out in September, I think it was September 99. Was in school, did community college, then I got accepted to a university. How I got accepted, I have no idea. I guess it was my life skills. And it was a very rigorous program. I was in biology pre-PA or physician assistant. And when 9/11 occurred, everything shifted. You know, I quickly tried to get back on the team. And then I had my buddy Ron ended up calling me up. We went through selection together, and he was doing some things overseas. He's like, "Hey man, they're recruiting for GRS. You got any interest?" And I was like, "Hell yeah." So that's when I started the vetting process, SF-86, and going through background check. And that kind of led me to my first deployment was in 2003 in Iraq. So we were right after the invasion. We infilled into Baghdad, and that was kind of what was my next chapter, essentially in my life. You know.
So that brings me to the most important question associated with the CIA. How accurate is Jason Bourne?
So we protected Jason Bourne. So he's super accurate. He's super badass. So we were there to protect Jason Bourne.
If on a scale of like 1 to Jason Bourne, where is your skill set?
Oh man. See, I'm self-deprecating, so I'm going to say a 1, but you know, I want to say a 10 because it makes me seem cool. But yeah, it was super interesting, man. Like it was kind of the Wild West at the time. And what I really loved about it was in 2003 in Iraq, it was kind of a new thing. Like there was no rules. It was kind of like, just get the fucking job done at the end of the day, keep your principles alive and do what you got to do. And there wasn't a lot of administrative paperwork and things like that. If there was an incident, an ambush, you know, have to do an incident report, but then you just go on your next day, like no big deal. So it was kind of freeing, you know, it was very, it was a kind of freeing time where I got to do the things that I wanted to do in special operations. But I had the opportunity to kind of be like a plank owner for GRS because they hadn't done this in a long time, you know, use especially contractors in combat. So first 30 dudes.
Did you enjoy it more or less than being a Green Beret?
I think honestly more. And it's not a fair assessment because I didn't serve a long time with the ODAs.
Yeah, of course.
And so the guys that have been longer, you know, there's no comparison. But from my perspective, only being, you know, I did 2 deployments. Some guys, most of my friends have done 25 years. So it's kind of like, it's not a fair kind of assessment, but I enjoyed it a lot more because the freedom, you know, we were on the roads every day, kind of in the thick of it all the time. And you had to rely on the guys on the right and the left of you. And we had to kind of essentially just, you know, our main objective was keeping our principals safe. Yeah. Like, so we were kind of, for all intents and purposes, expendable in the sense of something went down. We all knew that. And we accepted that responsibility, and it was great, you know.
So I won't ask you anything about your secret squirrel stuff because I know, you know, the CIA hates it when people talk about stuff. But I will say, in terms of culture, right? Which culture did you prefer? Because I have a lot of friends that are still in both worlds, and there's pros and cons of both. But like, you know, in the military, everyone has each other's backs. In the agency, it's not always the case. But how was it for you in GRS?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So like, I don't, like if I did 20 years in group or in SF as a Green Beret, I think it'd be easier kind of assessment. For me, I definitely preferred my time with the agency. And some of those reasons, to your point, was like, I'm still friends with those guys. We meshed. Like, I still keep up with almost all the guys because it's a very small number of people. And SF's fairly small number of people, but it was a unique circumstance at the time. You know, we shared. So if I went to combat with group, I probably have a whole different dynamic. I just didn't. Like, I got into a couple situations and shootouts with on just the 2 trips that I did, but they were just happenstance. They weren't. You didn't know you were going to be
casual shootouts,
right?
It was like,
there was more like you're just driving.
Like I'm having, like I'm just having a little espresso.
It actually was like,
excuse me there, William. I believe that gentleman over there is shooting at us. This is very casual. Sorry.
Literally. Yeah. Like it's just driving down the road and then boom. And then but these other ones were like, you knew every day you're going out, you're at a higher threat posture. You knew that those situations, it was highly likely that something was going to happen at some point in time.
So before we leave your background, which is crazy and interesting, what is the craziest story that you can tell us that has happened to you in either world?
I've got a weird...
And by crazy, it doesn't have to be like the most dangerous, but like I like to think of crazy as the most ridiculous, like people won't believe it's real story. So what's your best that you can share legally without Jason Bourne showing up?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because the one in SF was kind of like I've been IED'd several times and
that
been
blows.
in shootout that literally does blow. And that, one of the incidents I was in with the OGA, that was actually pretty funny because when we got hit going 75 miles per hour on Khadijah Expressway on Route Irish, which was at the time one of the most dangerous roads, we got hit thankfully in an armored vehicle or I wouldn't be sitting here. But, when we got the initial brunt of the explosion hit the vehicle, I mean, we just started doing circles, man, right? And there's a big cloud of smoke. And, from a training perspective, you're always taught to get out on the opposite side of the threat. Well, when you're spinning around at 70 miles per hour and you're in a cloud of smoke, you don't know which way is what. So we just get the hell out. But my buddy just starts laughing, He looks at me and he's like, bah! And I'm like, is this fucking for real? Like, we just got fucking IED'd and this dude's like laughing at me. He's a former Force Recon guy that was like driving the car, my buddy John. And so there's a lot of those, man. Like a lot of the personalities make it all worth the while. The dudes that you're working with, it's like keeping it light, And it's kind of, I think my situation in SF that I got in an ambush, that was actually pretty crazy too. But that one was, it's just those personalities, man, guys laughing,
So you kick ass in SF, you kick ass in GRS, and then you decide to get out of all of it. You walk away from both of those lives and you become, of all things, a corporate turnaround specialist.
Yeah, weird.
Because that's the normal progression.
Well, I think at that time it was like, I went through, after my ambush on Khadijah Expressway, the next time I went out, I got hit again. They just missed the vehicle with another IED. And that was like my third one within a short period of time in the same couple months.
So you start questioning. Like,
it wasn't me. I was, my ex-wife at the time was like, hey, you're going to fucking die. And I was like, well, I mean, this is what I'm here to, I feel like I was put on the earth to protect people, man. Like that's just my role. And I wouldn't do anything different. I would do all the same things again. It'd be nice if I knew the things I knew now, but
always the case, right?
Yeah, my buddy started an armored vehicle company. John Michael Zinn, he was a great dude. He was in third. He was SEAL Team 3, and my buddy Ron introduced me to him. He was my partner in Iraq. Mm-hmm. He started an armored. He was a entrepreneur. Started Indigent Armor out of Stanton, California, back in the day. I think it was around 2004 when it was official. So I invested in the company, and I didn't think I was going to see my money. My buddy they called me up and they were like, hey man, we're doing a seed. Can you help us, fund this opportunity? And then I ended up, when I got out, it gave me the opportunity to start as a PM, low level, project manager to kind of do these armored vehicle builds.
Yep.
So I got my business degree, Lean Six Sigma courses, and kind of immersed myself. And yeah, it was a great opportunity. I worked my way up to general manager. In just 4 years, we sold the private equity for $35 million. And it was crazy time. We just slept in the office, which I'm sure you can appreciate, being a small
100%.
Business to, taking a small business from nothing to something. And so, yeah, it was a great opportunity. And we all had that brotherhood, we just knew. And I just had that drive, I just I sleep in the office, and just, that's all I did is just work as a workhorse.
So kicking ass, Green Beret, kicking ass, GRS, kicking ass at, in the private sector. And then life kicked you in the balls.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a rough time. talk about that and talk about how you got there. And most importantly to me is like what you were feeling. So give us some insight.
Yeah. I think at a time in my life, I just wanted to perform, know, and I still do, even coming to a podcast, I just want to be able to perform and prepare, I always over prepare for things.
So for those of you in the audience, this dude was doing power cleans right before, he brought weights here. It was weird, and was doing power cleans and said he needed to get a party pump before the podcast. I don't know. I've never heard of that before, but he apparently knows what it is.
Do you have weights here? Wait, did I just undermine myself? Yeah. So where essentially the kind of bottom fell out for me, all those situations that I was in, within the military, within GRS, those things, I felt like I was pretty unscathed, but I did have some anxiety issues, when it came to work, initially, but I didn't really think about it. I just kind of kept grinding, and I just kept my head down and kept grinding. And 2010, we just made the sale of the company. And it was fairly short after, I might be wrong because I can't, my mind's not that great, but it might have been a week or two after. My buddy John, who was the CEO of our company, I was the general manager of Indigent Armor. So I had 65 employees making armored vehicles. And we had 3 or 4 businesses total. And he was overseeing all this. And he went to Jordan on a business trip. He ended up dying. He fell off a building 40 feet at Sofex in Jordan. And I got the call at 3 a.m, and that was kind of it kind of catapulted from there, a series of unfortunate events, as I like to call it, and very unfortunate. So right after he passed, I got the phone call. I was like, hey, man, are you sure this is the guy? Because we all had call signs, in the past, we'd be like, hey, Tex died. And we had a friend, Tex, when I was in country in Iraq. And somebody called his wife and said, hey, man, I'm sorry to hear your husband passed. But it was another text with the same call sign, right? So this stuff has happened before. So our guys on our business development team, we had guys from SEAL Team 6. We had guys from the agency. And I said, hey, bro, can you confirm for sure that he's dead? And they said, yeah. I was like, fuck. And this was 3:30 in the morning. I knew it was bad news.
Yeah.
And
nothing good happens after 1 a.m.
So from there, I went from 3:30 in the morning. At 6 a.m., I had to kind of walk up the street. He lived 3 doors down. We were I like to say the mafia. We all lived in the same neighborhood. Our CFO, him, John, our CEO, myself, and then we had another GM for another company that we ran. And I had to tell his wife, who was 9 months pregnant with his first boy, and he had 2 young daughters, Cameron and DJ. And it was they came to the door to answer the door, and their mom came down, and she just wailed, man. She just, as soon as she saw me, she knew what the deal was. And I had to go to work and go from there and put the happy face on and tell our employees, hey, man, everything's good to go. We're solid. And shortly thereafter, it's kind of a long story, but the key milestones was then, my ex-wife ended up filing for divorce on the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of his death. And, so I had no friend, plus he was a CEO. I had to go to work every day and go by his office, which I couldn't go in there for 6 months. It just rocked me. And we had to pick his body up at the airport and put his casket in when it came back from Jordan. And I had to open that up with his father because he wanted to get eyes on his son. He was a great guy. His father was our corporate attorney as well, 30 years practicing. And he's a Vietnam veteran. And he's so we're there prying his fucking casket, this big box. We're prying this thing open, and I'm like, fuck, he fell 40 feet, dude. This isn't going to be good. And there's a million of these things. These are just snippets. But so what ended ultimately where this led to was the private equity company. And I can't get into detail because I don't want to get sued. But we all had $3 million life insurance policies, and we just got acquired. So they looked at this as an opportunity to take care of the shareholders because legally there was some opening there. But ethically, I knew what needed to be done. And I would just talk to the chairman of our company at the time. And I said, hey, what are you going to do with your, what are you going to do about this? And he's like, yeah, we're looking into it. And it went on for 8 months. So I had this moral injury where I worked for a company for 8 months, knowing in my gut that I have a really good gauge on character where this was going to go. So at the end of the day, went on 8 months. I said, call New York. I can't do this anymore, man. Like, I just know where this is going. And they said, tell his wife to sue us. So I resigned on the spot. So I resigned. My wife divorced me. My buddy was dead. His wife was, I had to be there, you know, even when she gave birth, you know, like it was just a massive, just bad ordeal. So I started hitting the bottle pretty hard, and I got into pain pills and all these other things. I was drinking pretty much 24/7, but then I was doing MMA and jiu-jitsu to manage my anxiety because I started sweating all the time. And, you know, it got to a point where I couldn't even get, like, my boxing coach would wrap my hands up to go spar. And I would just be sweating before when I showed up to the gym. He's like, what's wrong with you, dude? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, so I would go home and I'd just drink. But then I'd work out once a day to 2 a day to 3 a day. So then I got down to 170 pounds where, you know, I was just so skinny. And the only way that I would get relief was to drink or take something, right?
Yep.
So anyway, that was kind of like that chapter. It was just a crazy time, you know, and that kind of led to my first suicide attempt in 2011. It was not even a year after. It was maybe 6 months. I had no job, no wife, no friend. All my friends were gone. And I was like in my house, 6,000 square foot house. Everyone's like, you got everything. And I was like, I ain't got nothing, dude. So I was like, how am I going to pay the bills? I got to go get another job. And my head's all fucked up. So that was kind of like what catapulted me into that. And what ultimately happened was I started drinking so hard that I was drinking 24/7 almost and isolating myself. I couldn't even go to my gym for a while. And I made a decision to kill myself in 2011. I don't remember what month it is because it was all haze. But my buddy Ron, somebody called him and said, hey, man, your boy's a mess, bro. And he was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's got 4 kids of his own. He's running a nonprofit. He's a great fucking guy. He's been by my side for 28 years now, which makes me seem old. But
no, we're old. Just to make it really clear, we are now officially
super old.
We are old.
But he rang the doorbell, man, and he rang the doorbell, and I'm never a suicide note guy. Sit on my couch, had plastic up in my bathroom because I was a conscientious suicidal guy. I sat on my couch, it was maybe around 10 in the morning, drank a half a bottle by that point, and my doorbell rang, and I was like, should I get the fucking doorbell or fucking off myself? And it was a hard decision, dude, to be honest with you. So I answered the door, and my buddy Ron's standing at the fucking door. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You live in Tulsa. I live in Lake Wiley, South Carolina. And he's like, hey, bro, you look like shit. He's like, go get dressed. I'm like, what are you doing here? And he's like, we're going. I said, where are we going? He's like, we're going to the bar. The worst, and he calls it the worst intervention ever, but it was the best. That was a turning point.
I'm worried about your drinking. Let's go drink and
let's
talk
go
about
to the bar.
Yeah.
So that was a turning point for me, is that day. Like, that was kind of the realization set in that I had problems, you know, like, so I you know, life just happened. So I ended up getting another job in 6 months, but I just grinded.
I want to stop you there for a second. Just kind of, one of the things that is always striking to me, a couple things. The first is that your friends all thought you were good. You know, a couple guys did, but for the most part, people thought you were good because monetarily you were doing well, you were physically fit, you were doing things. You know, I've known you for a little while, and you're an upbeat person. So
I'm a funny motherfucker when most of the time.
So you know, the juxtaposition of that and how you were feeling, if you can, and I know it's not easy, can you try to explain to people that have not really considered taking their lives, what do you think about? Like, what are you telling yourself during these moments? Because the reason I'm asking you this, and I know it's very personal, but you know, like every veteran, I have a ton of friends and acquaintances and former soldiers and former bosses that have killed themselves. And the story's almost always the same. It's, I had no idea, or I thought he was good, or yeah, he was a little bit off, but you know, he was tough, or he was fun, or he was whatever. So like, what were you telling yourself? Not what you were saying, but what were you telling yourself? What were you thinking?
Well, I think there's two things. I mean, first, for me, there was anxiety. Like I noticed this pattern 10 years later. So that was like the next 10 years of my life. I was successful outwardly, but I was having panic attacks at work. I had to wear a suit every day to work. My next job, I ran our U.S. armored vehicle business for Yankee, a great company. And then I got reloaded to my next one, a turnaround situation in Georgia, which led me to where I live now. And during that period, outwardly, everyone was like, hey, you're good to go. But I was just in my, like, so for me, I had anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation all the time.
But other than that, you were good.
Most of the time. So, but it was the anxiety was always there. Like so basically your brain, like your parasympathetic nervous system was on overdrive 24/7. I couldn't understand why, because my combat situations, the things that I were in, I had no issue. I had no and there's two things. You have a moral injury, and then you have which is more shame and guilt based, right? That's what I suffer from, which I didn't figure that out until like 12 years later, because I started diving into this, like, hey, I got to fix this shit.
Yep.
You know? So the other ones are more fear-based. When you have like nightmares, flashbacks, when you hear a loud noise and you react, that's fear-based responses, which is also PTS or post-traumatic stress. So mine was more from moral injuries of working for a company. There's other things that I won't talk about publicly, but they were more moral injuries because I have a strict moral code and I violated it twice. And I'm a principled guy, and when you violate your moral code, it can do just as much or more damage than
violated it in your mind. How?
Well, one is like in my gut, I knew that this company was going to fuck my buddy over, and he brought me into the company. I owed him everything, and I knew he would have fucking murked everybody that worked there, and I wanted to. Like, I still think about it sometimes, you know?
No, I get it.
And I didn't do it, and I have to live with that shit because they didn't tell me openly. They gave me and I was like, man, these guys are going to fuck us over, man. I just know it. And then when I found that out, I was like, I worked for them for 8 months and I wanted to burn the motherfucker down. And I didn't, because the people that worked for me, I wanted to take care of them.
Yep.
Because they moved from California to North Charlotte down to Fort Mill, South Carolina. And I was like, I can't fuck these guys' career over, man, because these guys won't make they won't have the same earning potential. You know, we're paying them top dollar for what they're capable of.
So going back, what are you telling yourself in this moment? Because like, you know, again, us casually sitting here, like I have also invested belief in people that did not come through for me, but I never thought, you know, man, I screwed this up. So
it's that bond, man. Like him and I, we were very close friends. We're also very competitive when it came to business. Like I would come home at 3 a.m. and his light's on. He's still fucking working. I'm like, God damn, I got to get back. I got to go work more, because he was a good mentor when it came to business, you know, my buddy. And I also shared the dirt over in Iraq. You know, we were in these really crazy Sadr city, 10,000 strong, and it's just me and him doing a route reconnaissance. And we're like, I hit a guy with my mirror once, and he's like, you know, we were going through these crazy situations. So even though we didn't know each other for 30 years, like I do with my other buddies, it was like it exponentially.
It was intense.
It's tight. You know, you know people better than your own family. You know what I mean?
But again, I hate to keep coming back to the same thing. I don't want to annoy you, but like,
you don't annoy
you
me.
You obviously, you know, you got to a point where you thought it was better to not be here than to be here. And what are you telling yourself on a day-to-day basis about yourself? What are you feeling? I want other guys that are in your situation, that were in the situation you were in, to like see that this is not real.
Yeah, 100%. Because you get ruled by anxiety and then depression, and then you cope with that. And then you throw fuel on the fire by drinking or taking substances. And then you go to suicidal ideation. So there was times where I thought about killing myself for months, like every waking moment. And it's like the only way out, you feel trapped. There's no other solution other than fucking killing yourself. And it's crazy. It doesn't make sense. Like when you talk to other people that haven't had that situation, you're like, I don't even understand that shit. I'm like, dude, I did that 10 years. And that's what led me to do what I'm doing now is like, you feel so trapped. The only way out is to put a fucking gun in your mouth.
So what do you,
right?
when do you, like, let's take a few steps back. When should people be reaching out? Because by the time you're already sticking a gun in your mouth and playing with the idea, like you're playing with fire.
100%.
You know, and I've had this conversation, as have you, I'm sure, many times with people I never would have thought that told me they stuck a gun in their mouth and considered pulling the trigger. You don't want anyone getting there. Where do you, as an individual, like now, if you were to start having any of these ideations again, where's the red flag? What are the signs that a person should be looking for?
I think there's a bunch. For me, I had a pattern. It was anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. So when you start getting, if you have anxiety issues, you're sweating, you feel like you don't want to be around people, like you get withdrawn. I was a fucking hermit, you know, like I'd go to work and then I'd go home. I don't go out. I don't socialize. I just go home. And that's a big red flag. Like so isolation.
Lack of socialization.
Yeah. You don't want to be around. And there's a bunch of different, from causation, there's a lot of things that lead to the end. With suicide, I mean, there's a lot of different situations, but I think the similarities. Everyone that calls me, they want to call me and talk to me because they know I understand the symptoms and what they're going through. But isolation is a huge one, right? You just want to be around people. It might be at first you might get uncomfortable at work. Then your friends, your close friends. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't even comfortable being around myself. That's when I was like, holy shit. I'm sweating, sitting in my recliner at my house around no one, and I'm soaking wet, having panic attacks. Like, what the hell? So I think anxiety is a big one. And then withdrawing from society, like when you don't feel comfortable around certain social situations, that's a big red flag. Because then that leads to depression. Depression's easy because you can look at your spouse and go, they're depressed.
Yeah.
They just don't seem happy.
Yeah.
It's hard to fake that, you know?
Yep.
So, but I think there are some of the red flags.
And one thing that when you're in a bad spot, alcohol makes everything worse. Like makes everything worse. When you are, like I know personally from going through divorce, like the only times in my life that I have really embarrassed myself, nothing like, to the extent of wanting to kill myself, but it's like when you're unhappy and you throw alcohol on top of that fire, nothing good happens. Like
100%.
You either you're mean to others, you're mean to yourself, you make bad decisions, you injure relationships, like nothing good happens. So like I'll say me personally, whenever somebody's going through a bad thing, even if they're not having suicidal ideation, I always tell people, if you're going through a rough time, run, lift weights.
And that's ironically what I tried was holistic approach, right? So I was like, I got to work out more. Because I didn't want, and I went on for 10 years and I was like, what?
But with alcohol, right?
Yes. Yeah. So what I finally realized, to your point, alcohol is literally the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
Like when people, I can't say this publicly, but I'll go ahead and say this. Like THC.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I'm not an expert per se, but a lot less prevalence of like getting into arguments and like suicidal ideation and also jumping further into, but I'll go ahead and just stop there and say alcohol is one of the worst things you can do if you're depressed. It just throws fuel on the fire. And every time that I was suicidal and I had a gun in my mouth, which was literally probably 100 times a year over 10 years where I was just a mess. And I would call my buddy Ron and be like, hey, bro, you've been a good friend. I'll text him. And then I'm out. And then he's like, what the fuck? I know what the hell you're doing. I was drunk every time.
Yeah.
Every single time. I was going through therapy when I figured that out. I finally figured out. She's like, well, how many times, when you were suicidal, when you're going to act on it, were you under a substance like alcohol? And I was like, 100% of the time.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So I'm telling, it doesn't mean you have to be 100%. You don't have to go cold turkey, but if you're depressed, you should go cold turkey. Yes. That's my recommendation. It's like, you got to quit drinking. That's like the best thing you can do to save your own life is to quit drinking and find some other outlet, for your anxiety and talk to a clinician. I'm also open about meds. A lot of guys are like the VA overprescribes. It worked for me, like as a starting point. Mm-hmm. It kind of leveled me out where I was like, I didn't have the peaks and valleys.
Yep.
And then I also cut out drinking where I was like, all right, I can't drink like I used to do every day of the week and going hard in the paint.
Yep.
Which is pretty excessive. So that's 100% going to help people.
So Ron comes into your life, in earnest, and you start figuring things out. And then you get some, you get some pretty bad news, right? Your hip's hurting. You go and get checked out. Talk about that.
Yeah. So 2019 in September, those past couple of years, I got back into high risk protection for celebrities and A-listers. I just was like, man, I can do this till I'm like 55 because I'm taking care of myself. I was like 230 pounds and I was doing jiu-jitsu and MMA and lifting all the time, taking care of myself, good nutrition. And I came back from Milan. I was like, man, my hip had been hurting for about 6 months, but it was very intermittent.
That was a nice low-key drop, though. I came back from Milan.
With a client,
I was doing this thing in Milan. No, not a big deal. Angelina Jolie, maybe you've heard of her.
Nothing that interesting, but I had this go on and I was like, I figured it was a sports injury. I've had tons of injuries.
Sure.
You're either hurt or you're injured.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is more of an injury. I'm pretty sure I tore something. Let me go check this out. And I waited a couple months. Like I'd feel good. And then I'd be like, man, I'm not moving. My mobility's a little weird. So I got an MRI out of pocket and the radiologist called me within 30 minutes because I was like, I know I tore something because I don't go there for anything.
Yeah.
He's like, bro, I've been doing this like 25, 30 years. He's like, I don't know. I've never seen shit like this. He's like, you need to be in the ER like right now. And my wife, Jen, she works at the hospital. She was in the ER. So I drove right to the ER. They admitted me for 5 days and they basically misdiagnosed me. They were like, you have a bone infection. You're good to go. We're going to give you some antibiotics. You'll be fine.
That sucks.
And I was like, because all my friends have been getting sick that I work with in 03 and 04 specifically in Iraq, guys have been dropping left and right, a lot of cancers. ALS, we've had 4 ALS deaths, I think maybe 5.
Really?
And then we've had brain cancer, pancreatic cancer, all SEALs, SF dudes under 40 years old. And I've got 2 right now that have cancer as well. 2 guys that I know have leukemia. And another guy has heavy metal poisoning, tons of surgeries. So we're the only ones alive so far. So I knew this, and I got a second opinion through Dr. Rayaputi. Shout out Dr. Rayaputi. And she's an infectious disease doc. Told her the whole situation where I've been. She sent me to ortho-oncologist, and that got the whole thing started. They did a bone graft. The results came back within a week. I couldn't walk for 6 weeks, load bearing, because they went into my femoral head. And when the results came back, I called them and they're like, oh yeah, you have cancer. It's pretty advanced. It's like bone cancer. It's chondrosarcoma. It's less than 1% of 1% of all cancers. But don't worry, you're going to be good. And I was like, this sounds serious.
You're like, I don't think you could follow that up with don't worry.
They're like, I'm sure you have questions. I'm like, yeah, I got a lot of questions. Am I going to fucking die like today? So then I had my femur taken out, like 3/4 of my femur.
Which I understand. I'm not an expert, not a doctor. I understand
good.
the femur is important.
It's very for
possibly a large bone in the body.
It apparently carries a lot of my weight when I try to walk. Yeah. So I figured that out pretty quick.
It's not at
myself.
all humorous.
I didn't pass PA
That
school.
was a bone joke. Sorry.
Well, I never made it I was never a PA for the record.
Yeah.
So I just play one on TV.
Yeah.
So I ask smart questions. I Google shit, WebMD.
Yeah.
And that's what started it off. They were like, hey, man, you're going to need to get your femur, your hip, your glute, your quad. That's all got to come out. And I was like, can I get custom made like knives out of my femur for my buddies?
Can I keep anything?
They wouldn't let me.
Like,
I seriously asked that question.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, I said, I have precedents on my iPhone. Somebody else has done this, but not for knives. And he's like, no, you can't do that. I was like, fuck.
So they take lots of stuff out of your body. And you come back from that, and how's life?
It was good because I had a purpose. I was like, well, I got to rehab. But at the time I'm still struggling with like suicidal ideation. So that's when I started getting treatment. I was like, man, I got to go jump on this stuff and get my mental health squared away. So for me, I did go to the VA. I started, working with the trauma recovery group. I was trying to figure out, I'm like, I don't know what bothers me. I feel good. Like I don't have any regrets. But that's what led me to figure out my buddy, John's passing with all those other things on top. That was like the catalyst that set everything ablaze. And that took me about 2 years to kind of really understand. I was going, through some medication at it, and I was trying a lot of things holistically because that's kind of my thing. I'm like, I can figure it's your brain, like how do you but there's like literal damage. I also, there's TBIs and things like that from blast waves and shocks that also come into account. And it's very complicated because PTS and TBI all the symptoms overlap. And so I started working on that. And that's been one of the most, I feel the best that I've ever felt in 12 years because I grinded, man. But that's kind of led me to the epiphany. I'm like, if I can't figure this out, I call myself a professional sufferer. I like that, that term because I'm pretty good. Like when I'm suffering, I always have it with a smile on my face. I like to make jokes and like,
sure.
I fuck with the doctors and they don't know what to think of me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm dying. I'm like, I got 2 cancers now. And they're like, what? And they don't know what to think, But that's what kind of got my head straight, but also led me to what I'm doing today with the foundation and all that stuff.
So that's a segue to, you have this cancer removed. You start getting, your mental health taken care of. You start prioritizing that. And then just last year, you found out what?
Yeah, last summer, they found nodules. They called it suspicious nodules in my lungs. And at that point, I knew I was stage 4 because the first place this bone cancer metastasizes is your lung. And but that's when I had a missed biopsy in February last year in 2022. They tried to go in and biopsy. They missed. That was awesome. You had one job, doc. Like, what the fuck? And then they went back in and removed my lower right lobe in September 20th of 2022. And then they officially gave me the stage 4. I have non-treatable chondrosarcoma metastasis. So there's no treatment, there's no chemo, no radiation. It's just surgery. So every 3 months for the rest of my life, I have like an 8% survival rate, I think, something like that. But basically, whenever they do these scans, if something pops up, it's either cut it out or die. That's your options. I'm like, that doesn't sound good.
Those options kind of suck.
Especially when you're a physical guy. Like I have a lot of my identity was with physicality. And I'm like, I don't even know if that's like a Mike Tyson word. I don't think I just made that shit up. But, I'm a physical guy.
No, I think physicality is legitimate. I think that's a legitimate word.
You're the smarter one.
I do. Let's not say that. Let's ask the ladies in the background. Ladies, is physicality an actual word?
Peanut gallery.
Kelsey says it's a real word, so I think we're good. How you doing?
Good.
How are you doing with all that? Like
really good, man. Like honestly, like my mentality freaks people out because it is what it is. At the end of the day, I would go back and do all the same shit the way that I did it because it was my path, right? And it led to me helping other people through doing setting up a nonprofit to help veterans that are struggling with mental health issues, suicidal ideation. I want to preserve and optimize veterans' lives through what we're doing. I'm also working on a documentary, Brother's Keeper, which is basically me trying to destigmatize mental health issues based on like, oh, you got a cool guy background. And
you and I are going to do an interview about that tomorrow.
Yeah, and I'm super stoked for it. And that's my, part of me is like, man, this is the best thing that I've ever fucking done in my life. And, you know, I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, at the end of the day, if you want to grow, you got to fucking suffer. But you have to realize it's not just suffering, it's taking something out of that process. You got to, if you got to put yourself in uncomfortable situations to grow. That's the only way. Like nothing grows, you know, in the light. It's like the darkness is what kind of perpetuates you to do great things. And that's what I want to start to do. I want to create legacy and things that I want to help people even after I'm gone. I want to start something that continues to help people, specifically veterans that are struggling.
You and I were, you know, we were just at SHOT Show in the not too distant past together. And, you know, I'm probably bastardizing this a little bit because I was a few whiskeys in when we had the conversation. But you said something to me that really struck me. And we were having that like quasi drunk guy conversation about everything you've been through. And you said, if I had known how much life I had left to live, I would have never considered taking my life.
Yep.
And I found that really profound, especially because you're staring down the barrel of, you know, a 92% chance of bad things.
Yep.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
And especially for the guys out there right now that are sitting here listening going, nobody wants me here. It doesn't matter if I live or die. Like life is bad. I've ruined X, Y, and Z, which is the common things that we tell ourselves when we're in these situations.
Yeah, I mean, the message for them is like, dude, you know, one of the things that keeps me up at night, I had three friends that were suicidal last week, spent time on the phone with them. And I'm like, it's not only that you matter, but the fucking wake of destruction that you leave when you commit suicide, you impact so many fucking people, man. Many people. And I can say this, but having been in that position, all you think about is a way out. And people are like, you're so selfish. That guy's going to commit suicide. He was so selfish. They're not thinking about other people. Yep. So I don't know if that'll resonate with people, but I'm like, bro, you matter. Not only do you matter, but for me, this next chapter in my life was because I fought. And I'm like, if you guys are a fucking warrior, I don't care if you're rock fucking bottom. If you identify yourself as a fucking warrior, the hardest thing for you to fight is your fucking self. And you have to get the fuck after it, you know? And the only way I know how to do it is go fucking head on. And that's seeking treatment, you know? Like reach out to somebody. It could be a chaplain. It could be a mental health specialist. It could be the VA. And I know there's a lot of, you know, people that are like, fuck the VA. I get it. But there's a million of resources out there and we're one of them, you know? And that's what I want to be is like, you got to reach out for help. First, you have to identify you have a problem. Second, you have to be willing to do something about it. And third, you have to fucking like take action.
Yep.
That's the 3 steps. So if your life fucking sucks and you feel like shit, don't kill yourself, man. Like go out there and fight for your life, and it's going to be harder than anything you ever did because fighting yourself is the hardest fucking thing you can ever do.
I didn't make the saying up.
You know?
I mean, I've had, you know, my buddy Jason Redmond, Jason Van Camp, and Chad Robichaud all use it when they speak, but fight off the X.
Yeah.
You know, and
Perfect,
so for those of you, that have no idea what that means, like when you get ambushed, the place, you know, the maximum killing zone for an ambush is considered the X. And if you stay there, you die. So you have to find a way off of it. And I
like to quote Paddy Pimblett from the UFC, right? Mm-hmm. Before his reputation just went the other way. But Paddy Pimblett had a fucking badass, like what turned me on to him maybe about 3, 4, 5 months ago. I don't remember. You know, he just got off. He was doing his weight cut.
Yep.
And he got a call that one of his friends committed suicide. After his fight, thankfully for him, he won his fight and emotions were high. And he was like, I'd rather my mate be crying on my shoulder than be going to his funeral next week. He's like, talk to someone, talk to fucking anyone. And it was one of the fucking coolest things because it was authentic. It was fucking raw and real. And I'm like, that's what the message is. Like, I can't do any better than what he did, is like, go get some fucking help, man, because your buddies are going to be fucking rocked and devastated. And it's not fair to anyone else.
You're going to hurt a lot of people.
100%.
So given that, your situation, I don't want to in any way minimize it, but it's an interesting backdrop because, again, you and I spoke a lot at SHOT Show. You don't really give a shit anymore about, well, what's so-and-so going to think? Or, what if they don't like me? Like, these aren't things that occur to you anymore because there's a reasonable chance that time is short. And so you've got to maximize it.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. My thing is with cancel culture and all the other shit going on in the world, I don't want to block or stymie growth for helping people. That's 100%. My only consideration. Other than that, I don't give a fuck, what other people think. I'm all about, I understand where people are at, to a degree. I can't say I understand every situation, but the process is fairly similar. You know what I mean? And if we can reach just one person, that's why I was like, if I do a documentary and I spend $200,000 on it,
you save one,
and I save one life, fucking 100% worth
Absolutely
my time.
Worth it.
I don't care if it takes me 3 years. That's what I want to do, because that's one person. But I've already had, when you do the media, there's not enough going on in the press right now. There's not a lot of these podcasts talking about, because it's
not fun. It's
not a fun, I make it fun because, I'm like, you got to make light of the situation, but.
Yeah, what's a little suicide amongst friends?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, But at the end of the day, there's not enough media attention. There's not enough focus on it. Nobody wants to talk about it. And that's what we got to raise awareness, destigmatize it. That's why I'm here, is just, I'm like, dude, yeah, I've had a cool background, as far as my military career. I did some cool stuff. There's many, many, many other people done way more rad stuff than me. That's not the point. Comparison is the thief of joy. So you can't say, hey, man, I want to get help, but there's more people more deserving. Yeah. That's a fucking misnomer and a bad idea. Like, you're the person. So if you're struggling, you got to be the person that reaches out and ask for help, because there's a million good resources. You just go online. There's 40,000 nonprofits out there.
Interjecting real quick. Right now, the members in the military that are killing themselves at the highest rate are 18 to 25-year-olds that have never deployed. So the idea that whatever you did wasn't enough to get help is insane. What I believe happens is you get out of the military and you lose your tribe.
Yeah.
And you lose your purpose. You're not defending the country anymore. And you go back to whatever life you had before. Most people just go home and they don't replace those things, and it causes a major problem.
Right.
But I want to shift gears, right? So I sent you, before you came on the show, I said, what do you want to talk about? And like, you were going to come up with a thing to talk about. I was going to come up with a thing to talk about. So I want to start with your thing. And I said, what is the thing that concerns you the most about the country right now? And you annotated that one of the concerns you had was with the current state of masculinity.
Well, number one, for the country, I can't even, it's culture. I'll go like super broad because it's identity. When I was going through rehab in 2019, the next 3 years, I was like, what the fuck country am I living in? Like, I don't recognize it. There's like, between the racial riots and this and that, cancel culture, woke culture, politics, vaccine, no vaccine, mask, no mask. Like, I could go on and on and on. That's just in 3 years. Now, if you take a step back, I think part of, like, we could talk about systemic issues, and I like to have an idea of like how to fix it. And I don't like bitching about things I can't fix.
100%. Yeah.
However, if you just take one segment out of that, like something we could talk about, because like I'm a male, you're a male. Look,
You don't know that.
ish. You could identify. I'm gonna get canceled on this. I know I'm gonna get canceled.
Let's get canceled together.
But I think, one issue out of a million different things is, the term toxic masculinity always is it's just been coming up more and more. And then it was probably 6 months ago, I heard about testosterone poisoning. That was a term. I was like, what the fuck is It was testosterone poisoning. What the fuck is that? And so there's this whole idea that being a male, and it's funny, is it's not okay anymore. Like if you're assertive, and they like to use word dominance. I don't know who they are, but they're people in the media, and that's part of the issue is where does all this stem from? And I think over the last 10 years, probably longer, but certainly in the last 10 years, social media has blown up.
Sure.
Kids that are growing up are very reliant on technology, whether that's gaming, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I've never even had a Facebook account, right? So I'm ancient.
Julia in the background also has never had a Facebook account. That's
Shame.
because she's a very young woman.
Yeah, that's for old people.
Doesn't believe in.
Yeah, you got to go on TikTok.
She's
man.
on TikTok and the gram when she's slumming.
But I think there's an issue with when you talk about toxic masculinity, I think there's this, you're basically trying to undercut men from being men. And I'm like, it's okay to be a man. It's okay to be a woman. I don't care how anybody identifies, to be honest with you. That's the beauty of this country is anybody can be anybody that they want. And long as they don't hurt somebody else or try to push their ideals on me, I'm cool.
100%.
Where I have a problem is there's young men growing up in this country. My wife and I are raising an 18-year-old. And watching how he went through school and just the conversations and debate that are going on in public school systems. And he was in military school at one point, which was private. So that we felt like we had some level of control. But it's kind of concerning because it's not okay to be a man. It's not okay to be dominant. It's not okay to be if you work out, he's a toxic male because he likes to be physically fit. I'm like, that's not the case. And I think it's very confusing if you're coming up as a young man today in today's culture. It's where do I fit? When somebody says you're going to be you're a strong young man, what the fuck does that mean to me? Mm-hmm. And
so I want to throw some stats out because when you brought this up, I wanted to prepare myself. It's also something that I care about. I'm a dad with 100 kids, so I have sons, I have daughters, and I think that the country has done a phenomenal job of investing in women over the last generation. I think that we have done a terrible job of investing in young men, and so I want to throw out some things. These all come from scientific studies. This isn't Fox News, and this isn't CNN. This is this is what's happening right now.
Peer reviewed data.
This generation has a significant testosterone decrease. So our generation, when we grew up, the current generation has anywhere from 20 to 40% less testosterone than we had. They don't exactly know why yet. It could be lack of sports. It could be something in the food we're eating. It could be
it's physicality, though.
There's something going on. We don't know.
Right.
We don't know. I'm not a scientist, and they haven't figured it out yet. But that is a real thing, and it's a real problem. There's a marked increase in school shootings, youth violence. This is all men. Women are not shooting up schools. There's a massive increase in obesity in young men. Only 40% of people in college are men now. 60% are women. This is a significant change from when we were kids. Mm-hmm. Middle class and poor men are seeing year-over-year decreases in adjusted income. Women are seeing increases. 1 in 4 boys are now classified as having a developmental disability. And then a crazy statistic, and I did not see, I had no idea that this was the case, but so kids without fathers in households have a significantly higher chance of ending up in prison, using drugs, being obese, enlisting in risky sexual behavior. This is especially true of women. Being involved in abusive relationships, also especially true in women. Live in poverty. And the crazy thing is, this is only true in single mother households. In single father households, where there's only a dad, children have almost identical statistics as those of married families. So for the first time, people are identifying that a critical component to successful children is having a father figure around. It doesn't have to be your genetic dad. Genetic dad or stepdad in the household is a critical component. But simultaneous to us identifying this as a critical component, there are fewer and fewer men that are sticking around to be fathers. So when I think about, to me, toxic masculinity is like faking the funk, like not coming through and doing your job, like as a dad, as a man, as your responsibility to society. And so I wanted to drop that on you and then let you talk about,
Well, I'm not an expert. Listen,
neither am I.
But as you drop those statistics, so you look at three factors. Nutrition, it's gone down.
Sure.
Fast food is super prevalent.
Yep.
If you went back 50 years, fast food wasn't as prevalent.
Yeah, it was a treat.
It was a treat. When I was growing up, we didn't have, my dad was a cop, single dad raising me. If we went out when we were little, it was like maybe McDonald's like once a month.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, wow, we get to go to McDonald's.
And I don't even eat fast food my whole adult life. I don't eat it unless Chick-fil-A, shout out. So you have nutrition, and then you have the statistic where you don't have, fathers sticking around as a role model, but then you have social media, which is a huge impact, and gaming. Kids are sedentary, leads to obesity, and they're online. They don't engage. That's a huge difference. So when I grew up, people got the news from the newspaper. Yep. My dad would read the newspaper. The old guys on the weekend, the old people would go to a diner, talk about politics, make informed decisions based upon what they read. Now if you look for Facebook, you had more, like you actually had to read. Then you went to Instagram, more photo-based. And now you got TikTok, it's even shorter, clips. Yeah. So you're seeing a degradation of like attention span. Yep. Like, give it to me now. But with that comes a huge problem, which is kind of a little bit off topic, but people, as they're looking at this stuff, they're not really getting the facts, which is leading to, like, social media. If you look at the social dilemma, everything's fed off of anger. So they're looking at photos, making 100%, like it's not an informed decision based on fact.
But I want to push back just because our topic right now is the problem with men, right? So I agree with everything you're saying, and I've said the same things.
But kids are just sedentary.
But women are seeing the same messaging that guys are seeing, and they're thriving. And guys are, as a collective, now the high-performing males are still high-performing males. They're making more money, they're doing better, but like the majority of men are doing worse. And so why do you think that is? And since we're playing expert right now, what do you think needs to change to turn that around?
I think if you take social media, that's an input, right? The genie's out of the bottle. It's like Pandora's box. It's like, well, I don't know how to cork that. But I think parents need to parent, like, number one. And like, we didn't let our, Gavin, our 18-year-old, we did not let him have, social media. Well, I'll say an iPhone till 14 years old. At 16, we let him have a fully enabled phone where he could Google whatever because he was old enough. I was like, well, you're going to be 18 soon. So I think you got to put those restrictions on. Also gaming. I didn't let him sit in the house and just sit there gaming. He wanted to game all day long. I'm like, academics are important, man. Sports are important. This is kind of a nice to have. It's not your being. But I think if you look at social media, kids are confused, especially young men, now more than ever, because they're like, where do I fit? And part of that is based on social media and the expectations of guys. When you start throwing around toxic masculinity and testosterone poisoning and nobody fights back, why is that? Well, the older generation, I'll throw myself into that boat, people don't want to push back on that because we have a woke And, you know, our culture is a cancel culture. So if you're a working professional, I don't have to worry about that because I'm quasi-retired, but I'm running a foundation. So I don't want to get into that fight. Why? Well, because I don't want to detract from helping people. Because social media gives a platform to less than 1% of people, this small demographic that has these ideals, and they run rampant.
Yeah.
Because guys like myself, I'll call myself out on this, are afraid to hip check them publicly because there could be a huge backlash that impacts you financially for the older generation of men. Then you have some guys fighting back, and they're seen to be the far right guys.
So hold that thought for a sec, because I'm going to bring that's my topic, and that's what we're going to close with. hold that thought for a sec, but I want to throw another, you know, when we talk about toxic masculinity, and I think there is such thing as toxic masculinity.
Well, of course.
I think there's a difference between masculinity and toxic masculinity. I think that, you know, but the highest percentage of men who have never had sex that are 30 or younger is happening right now. And there are like scores of interviews, like, you know, scientific interviews with these people. And there's essentially like a big portion of this generation that has no interest in it, which is something that, coming from our generation, I can't even fathom, because that was literally the only thing we thought about, you know, when we were teenagers. But like again, you know, and I don't know if this is
online porn
tied to and that's one of the things that
of course
they're talking about. Is
we had to trade Playboys. So like, look at the difference, like the ease of, I'm trying to think of the term and terminology for, like, you know, the quick fix. So when I was growing up, we would have to like beg, borrow, and steal. You couldn't go to a store and buy Playboys if you're like, you know, 14.
Of course not.
They look at me and they're like, you're like 10, dude.
Of course not.
You know? So we'd sneak into the attic, you know, you go to your buddy's house and be like, yo, I got Dad's Playboy. And you'd have to beg, borrow, and steal. And you'd have to actually communicate face to face to get that fix. Mm-hmm. Well, now people that don't parent well, they give them an iPhone, they have full carte blanche to literally the most obscene crap.
You can go find whatever you want. You can
at
find
a super young age.
Crazy stuff. Yeah.
And that's not good. And why would you want to go have a sexual relationship if you're online all day looking at that kind of stuff? It's going to detract.
I think there's another piece to it that I think about a lot, and like I think it's bad for society. I'm not saying it's going to change. Like, I know how the world does not go backwards, right?
Right.
But when we were kids, if you wanted to ask a girl out, you had to physically ask.
You had to have game.
Well, it's not even game.
Well,
like, forget game for a second.
You got to at least talk.
Because I am not a person with game. I never have been. I never will be. But you had to walk up to a girl that you liked, have all the anxiety associated with that, and ask her out.
Right.
And sometimes she says no. And you're like, oh, God. And it was like in-person rejection. But you had to go out there and have that courage. And if you had beef with somebody, like, you had to, maybe they were picking on you. You know, that happened to me. Like, when I moved back from Italy, you know, back to the United States, after living in Italy for a long time, I got beat up all the time for being an Italian kid, even though I was an American citizen born in America, but I had been in Italy for a while. So, like, I had to learn how to fight. I started combat sports because I was tired of getting my ass kicked. So I joined judo, you know? But there was like things were very visceral and direct in our generation. Definitely. Whereas I watch my kids now, and it's like,
Snapchat.
Flirting is Snapchat.
You take a picture of your forehead, send it to a girl, and what was that?
Flirting is Snapchat. They ask each other out via text message. There's no, it's not visceral and personal. If a kid fights in school right now, he's probably expelled. So all the things that are, frankly, very normal, masculine coping, like, I personally, it's not like I want kids fighting, but I personally don't think middle school and high school boys getting into a fist fight over something stupid is a big deal.
It's part of life.
But where I live now,
sorting it out.
We had my kids are friends with two first cousins that got into a fist fight over a girl, and the two families sued each other.
Jeez, that's crazy.
And it's like, guys, like, this is insane. And so, we ask ourselves, like, how are we in this situation? And it's like, we're not asking people to have any responsibility for what it takes to be an adult. Like, childhood is extended. You're a child through college now. You're not an adult. Like, it used to be like, you turned 18, go do something. Like, you can go to college, you can get a job, but like, you're your own responsibility now. Now it's like,
I think you hit the nail on the head.
People are still paying their kids' phone plans and they're 30, you know?
It's
like, Quigley, you laughing in the background over there? Quigley, do your parents pay for your phone? Do your parents pay for your phone?
They do.
Yeah. It's hard out here. You see these economies?
But that's the answer. Like, they're all the same things, like what I'm saying about the old timers going to read the paper.
Yeah.
You're processing data, you're talking and engaging one-on-one.
It's personal.
Which takes, even having a debate takes courage, right?
Yes.
You're taking all that out of the account.
Yep.
And you're getting those quick fix. Mm-hmm. You're not putting your reputation on the line going up to some girl. You're just going on Tinder or Bumble or whatever the new thing is.
Yeah, you're swiping.
It's so easy.
You're literally
It's so easy.
swiping people as if they are
irrelevant.
a pair of socks.
Yeah, you're like, no,
or shoes, or a T-shirt. Like,
she said no, not a big deal.
I don't like this. Yeah, like, it doesn't. It's not. There is no risk, and the more risk you remove, the less human you become. Like, I just think that, like, as much as it sucked to get rejected every now and then, it's like, all right, that wasn't that bad. I'm fine. Go out with someone else. Like, I mean, like, that's an important lesson, because you now have dudes that, like, decide they're in love with a girl that they don't even know, that stalk them, that, like, that turns to violence.
It's like, have you ever talked to this person?
You don't even know this person,
like, no.
but, like, you're all in. It's like, maybe take a step back. Like, but there's a whole generation of people that haven't had to do this, and I just think that is an issue. So, all right, I want to transition, because we don't want to have one of these 17-hour podcasts, because we're not that cool. I mean, you're cool, but, like, you're like 2-hour cool.
Yeah,
probably
maybe
not 17.
Probably like 15-minute cool.
Yeah,
like,
well,
10, 15.
That's what she said.
Swipe right.
Anyway, so we're going back to what you were talking about before. Social media. So really, I'm a big believer in, like, I was on the Tim Pool podcast, and Tim, and I like enjoyed being on it. I was very appreciative of being on it. But Tim is, like, adamantly a Civil War guy. Like, we're coming on the next Civil War, and the whole time I was like,
algorithms.
No. I was like, no, I don't think so. And there's a number of reasons. I don't even want to talk about that, because I'm not having a Civil War conversation right now. But here's where I was going with that. So last year they did a poll of all Americans, and, like, this, there's no partisanship. It was just like, what do you believe on this issue? What do you believe on this? And what they found is that Americans agree universally on 84% of everything. And they compared that to, like, how Europeans. So to put this in perspective, a liberal in America is more aligned to a conservative in America than a liberal in America to a liberal in Europe, or a conservative in America or a conservative in Europe. Like, it's so close. But yet I feel, and this is emotion, I feel like, we are at, like, visceral odds against each other. Like, the left and the right have never been further apart. But actually, over time, the data suggests that we're more together. And so, so these, I'm a big data guy, I believe in it. So if we are so aligned, why do we have
algorithms?
A large portion of the talking heads discussing it like we're about to have a civil war, when these people literally have no idea what civil war really looks like? You've been around as long as I have, longer, so you've probably seen Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine. Like, there's nothing cool about civil war. Like, it is not good.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple root causes to that. It's like, where are you getting the data? And if you look at the media, you look at social media, what sells, what gets the most attention is negative attention. Mm-hmm. And they realized this from society, and they capitalized on that, And I think that's kind of one of the big selling points for social media is, it's like the social dilemma, I think it was on Netflix, is anger fuels interaction. Mm-hmm. So that's what all people see is based on those algorithms. They don't want good news, feel good. So what I've chose to do with social media, what people can do to change it is like, I want to weaponize social media for good. For what I do, I try to stay out of politics on mine because I don't want anything that's going to divide people anymore.
Yep.
I'm not saying what I do, I'm like a speck. But if more people do, if you're posting things that are positive, I haven't had a troll yet. I'm like, where's my troll? Maybe I'm not famous enough,
They're coming.
Yeah. Shout out trolls. Give me some bad, interaction. But it's because I'm not putting anything out. Like, I'm like, look, dude.
It doesn't matter though. Give it enough time.
But I think that's one of the data points is like, to your point, is like, why, like I believe the CIA has recently run that statistic. They do it in all these different countries, and they've done it here in the US. And they said, we're primed for civil war. If this was a third world nation, we're like 84% probable going to go to civil war. Do I think that's the case? No. But I also think that there's that large majority in the center, that big, if you take like a bell-shaped curve, like Six Sigma, that majority is silent.
Nice.
I know, I was just trying to sound smart. It didn't work. But I think that a lot of people are silent, and you're also not going to get the engagement of, like, the feel-good people aren't getting it. You get the fringes.
Now, you said something at the very beginning of this conversation where you were talking about, like, the juice isn't worth the squeeze with cancel culture. You don't even want to get involved because you have nothing to gain from it. But it is the truth. Like, half the time when I'm on social media, I roll my eyes at people from both sides of the aisle espousing these extreme idiotic positions. And it's like, I'm not even putting my toe in the water here, right? Because I don't want to deal with the idiots affiliated with these people. If you say, hey, this guy's wrong, and here's why, you now have to deal with crap from hundreds or thousands of people. And it's like, these people aren't going to listen to me anyway, so you don't say anything. But the truth is that, like, most of America is like, let's take it all down a notch. And the stats show that the media and social media is driven by 8% on the left and 12% on the right. They are essentially the narrators of the story, and everybody else just kind of, for better or for worse, like, picks a side or shuts up.
And I think that's the problem, though. I always say, like, less than 1% of the country has the largest voice, right? And they're the drivers.
Yeah.
Because we allow them to do it. Because you engage and give them fuel. It's like that negative engagement. If you jump on that bandwagon, you're boosting their ratings, and that's all people see.
Yeah.
So the answer to the question is, stop engaging with that silent, that crazy majority or minority. Stop engaging with them, and they'll go away. But instead, like, we have the silent majority that tends to, like, jump on board and start writing hate, and it's like you're fueling them, and their ratings are going up. You're boosting their credentials, and then guys like us or the viewers are seeing that shit nonstop.
So I've experienced it. I've experienced it twice in recent history. So the first is, the fall of Afghanistan. I was involved in the evacuation of Kabul at the end of that, and then in the wake of that, there was a bunch of support, right in the wake, and then, we kind of got into this situation where, like, the Democrats didn't want to talk about it because it was seen as a blight on the president's record. And the Republicans wanted to talk about it, but only as a blight on the president's record. And neither group wanted to solve the problem of all of these people that we had promised we would take to safety. The Democrats don't want the people here because, it's a reminder of, the president's failure. And the Republicans don't want the people here because right now it's in vogue to be anti-immigration amongst Republicans. And so there are very few people that are in politics that are willing to stand up and say, this is the right thing. This is the thing we should be doing. And I find it, you talked earlier about a moral injury. I see that as a moral injury. And then I'm seeing the same thing in Ukraine where, I can understand a person saying, I think we should stay out of the war. That's a totally reasonable situation. But I don't understand a person saying Putin's a good dude and we don't understand and oh, the Ukrainians are corrupt and he's just trying to weed out the corruption. That's insane. It's insane. I've been there. I've seen the situation. And so it is getting harder and harder to give people the reality because of this. There are two sides to everything. We should be able to agree on lots of things. Russia invading a sovereign nation, that should be pretty hey, that's not okay. We can argue about what we want to do. But that should be pretty universally not okay.
Yep.
And so, all right, my last question on this topic. You can make one change as king of the world that is going to, or at least king of America, that's going to change the way that we treat each other politically. What is it?
Terms on Congress? Yeah, that's a tough question.
I know.
That's a tough question.
That's why you make
a big question.
That's why you make the big bucks.
Yeah.
Let's solve this tonight.
The biggest change, say that one more time.
What is the one change that you would make as king of America that solves this political problem we have? Not of telling people what they have to think, but making it so that we can be reasonable with each other.
Man, that's a tough one, man. Between social media and the media, I think they're the two biggest. Honestly, from what we see every day, I think there would be change within the demographics with the media as a whole, and I call that social media and media. What that change would be, because
shoot from the hip, one
of the biggest things for me,
king.
I feel like people should do whatever they want to do. It's kind of like Elon Musk taking over, Twitter. I thought that was going to be a great thing. And then there started to be controls. I'm like, I believe free press. I feel like everybody should be able to say what they say. Where I think it would go down to algorithms, and I don't know how you would do that, but I think we need to get rid of the algorithms in social media, and also if it bleeds, it reads, that mentality. I think I would find some smart people to figure out what's the answer without imposing and limiting free speech. Let's take these algorithms out and let people engage in a proper manner. I think that would be one of the quickest ways to change our society.
The core problem is the algorithm tries to find like-minded people so that it
generates hate, and division. And I think I don't know what the answer is as far as specifically how to change that. And that goes with the media as well. If you look at Fox, CNN, whatever your BBC, whatever that is, it's the same issue with the media as in social media. And I think you got to change that model as far as how do you capitalize those things. And I think they just need to, I'd be a czar and hire a board of people hey man, we're going to change the model of social media and media, and those algorithms need to go. It just needs to be,
just pure as the driven snow, as God intended, as the social media gods intended. All right, rapid fire questions. Rapid fire questions to close. These have to be quick answers.
Go.
You can't go deep. Why are you successful?
Motivation and drive.
Okay. you can only, we're going to wipe your brain completely. You only get to keep one skill. The rest is gone. Who you are, everything else. One skill.
Not quitting.
Okay. Good one. What's something that you've fixed about yourself that's made a huge difference in your life?
I would have to go back to the mental health, like I put a lot of time into that. So I would say self-help,
Okay. What's the toughest animal that you could kill in hand-to-hand combat?
Wow, man, you're tough. I want to say something cool like grizzly or cheetah, but I don't know that that's the case, or lion. We'll go with honey badger.
Honey badger. You think you could take a honey badger?
Yeah, they're little. I could drop kick that thing with my titanium leg.
Ooh, honey badger's a tough animal.
I know, that's why I went with it, but it's small and it's kind of doable.
They can be bitten by a poisonous snake and just recover and then eat it.
Yeah, we're gonna go with honey badger.
All right,
sexy.
honey badger.
It sounds sexy. It rolls off the
that
tongue.
is a bold choice, sir. Last one. If you could wish one change into existence that could make this country better, and the instant you wish it happens, what would it be?
I would get rid of all social media. Boom. Nailed it.
Julia's crying in the background.
I know. She's like
literally crying. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the neutral position. We've got your socials, but do you want to say your socials, or do you want me to read them off this paper? I think you could do it dynamically, profoundly.
I can do it. Yeah. So again, not on Facebook, but on Instagram, Chris_Cathers on Instagram. And then if you want to go to our landing page to see what we're doing with the documentary until we get our website up at the end of next month, that's wearebrotherskeeper.com. And soon we're going to have all our socials up at the end of next month. We're going to have everything: Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, at brotherskeeper.org. So there are our socials.
Awesome. And super excited for Brothers Keeper. I'm consulting with Chris's amazing team on that documentary, and it's going to be great. We're doing our interview tomorrow. And as always, you can find us at neutral_position on Instagram and YouTube. Yes, Julia's scowling at me in the back. I don't know what I've done wrong. I feel like I did a decent. What's wrong, Julia? Neutral_position on Instagram and YouTube, and I'm at Nick Palmisciano on Instagram, YouTube, and at Ranger_up on Twitter, where I basically just post the same video every day. Thanks, guys. Chris, thanks so much for being on. I really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. I think it's an iPhone. Not 100% sure. Oh, that was dope. Yeah, put that on the intro.